with our Vikings Vinland Village Tour test. So, we are stopped at our first tent. What am I looking at?
All right, so this is our king, and he appears to be doing some woodwork, but I am going to have to take a look. It looks like he would be making spear handles, I'm guessing, but I don't know 100%. I would actually defer. What are you doing?
So our standard pole has not been working properly, so for the Vinland flag standard, I am making a new pole for it to stand up on to be presented on the field. Oh. So what I'm currently doing now is I'm dovetailing the wood so that when the two pieces are put together, they won't bend, and then I can bind it with rope and keep the structure from limping down, I guess would be the best words for it, and being able to stand up straight so it would be able to be seen by the whole crowd. The idea being is that because we only have one workable standard right now, which is the Raven standard, is that eventually each group will have their standards and will be able to line the battlefield with the standards.
Wonderful.
Okay, and can you tell me about the tools he's using?
The tool that he's using is a saw. I'm not familiar with the exact type of saw. He did mention he was doing dovetailing, so I'm sure it's part of a more fine woodworking versus a construction type tool.
You are correct.
Yep.
So the dovetail saw is basically what I'm using right now. It's a type of flat saw that can do both hard and soft wood and is more flexible than other types of saws are. That's why it's used for more fine cuts, because then it can work around and it doesn't just wedge through everything. You've got a bit more of a space to be creative with it. So the other types of saws that can be used are the bow saw, which commonly for the period is made out of antler or wood, and with a very small bit of metal used for the teeth. Gas metal was very precious in the Viking Age. So saws that were like this were very, very uncommon because of the fact that only someone who was an artist in the field of carpentry would actually use them, because they were expensive to say the least and very hard to make.
Awesome.
Very nice.
Can you tell me about his tent?
His tent would be a small Anglo-Saxon design called a geteld. His particular geteld has a separate door and front panel. Most getelds would be 3 walls, and this sunshade would drop down, acting as the door in the evening, raising during the day. And we'll see some open ones as we go around there. His is a particular variant. I'm not sure if it's historically accurate with the interior door.
Which area would it hail from?
So the Anglo-Saxon would be, you'd see this a lot more in Britain, and it did come from, they did also go down to France. They eventually evolved into the French
Which area
bellwether.
was this one in particular hailed from?
With the door, I'm not
variation with the door.
The variation with the door, I'm unsure. I know it's a geteld, but I'm not sure your specific region.
You're absolutely right that it's geteld, and you're absolutely right that it's from the France area.
Okay.
It was a Frankish design.
Frankish.
Yeah.
Got it.
And so, but in the time range that we portray, 793 to 1066, they were an unusual design.
Yes.
So they were more common to be the normal kind where you just have the one panel flapping up or flapping down.
So it is, with the closer to the being Frankish, it eventually went to the French bellwether.
You're right.
Was the eventual evolution of it, which we see a lot more in the medieval era.
Yep.
Yeah. So late period.
Do you live in these tents all year round?
You can. If you are somebody on the go with enough money to have a tent, you could very easily live in it year round. You'd want to bulk up on the furs and the wools for the winter time. But for the most part, this would be a temporary shelter when you're away from home, either on trading or raiding, away from your physical home structure, be it a homestead of stone, wood, or sod, and the like. But it is possible, and people have lived in tents year-round, going back into many, many eras and cultures.
If you need to interrupt, go ahead.
Buddy. What's up? Uh-oh. You stepped on a rock? That better? Kisses? Oh, big one? Okay. You gonna be okay? All right. Do you need a big hug? Okay, we're good then.
That was great. All right, shall we? Yeah.
And like any era, it takes a village to raise the children, but sometimes it takes children to raise a village. Yeah, do be careful where we step here. There are spikes in the ground.
So, what's this tent then?
So this would be the kind of a predecessor to the one we just looked at. This is also a Geteld, and we'll see a few of the open ones as well. This one is a very large Geteld as far as that goes, and this door here that we see tied shut would be similar to the drape back there, where this opens up. You'd have 2 additional poles holding it. That would be these support ropes right here, creating a very open atmosphere. And you'd have your bed and your sea chests and this and that in there, and be able to live in it. So it is very more of with the Anglo-Saxon design. You'd see a lot more of these in England, maybe up in Scotland, Wales, Ireland, and they were actually the same era as the Viking A-frame tents. So you're still looking at the whole Viking era, where these would be popular from 793 right up to 1066, with them phasing out a little closer to the 1066 era in favor of some of the more modern designs.
So all the Vikings would have one of these?
Not really the Vikings. Viking is more of a profession. The Norse usually stuck to their A-frames. You'd see this more in England, Ireland, Wales, in the British Isles and Northern Europe.
But even peasants would have one of these?
No, a peasant wouldn't be able to afford something like this. This would be a very wealthy man or a leader, so a wealthy merchant, a leader, a jarl, to be able to afford this much canvas and cloth, to be able to have a tent that large. A poorer person, if they could even afford it, might only have a small tarp or a little pup tent-like drape at best, and that's if they could even have that.
Can I go in there?
No, this one's actually closed off from the public, so we don't want anybody to go into any of the tents, even if they're open. It would be display only open. If they are tied shut, then the owners of those particular tents want their privacy respected, so we don't let members of the public go through a closed tent.
Okay, perfect. We're gonna skip that one and we're gonna come over here.
Okay.
My last name is Hebrew for lime tree. I have family photos with the Star of David written on
All right.
From
So, what's this tent?
So this tent would be what we call a Viking A-frame tent. So this is the atypical Norse design. They've been found in a couple of different sites, in as well as different decoration levels. So this is what you'd see the more typical Viking or Norseman living in. It's a wedge-style tent, fairly simple in design, and A-frame just from the shape. These kind of tents you'd probably find on ships. When they're traveling across the ocean, you could set up the wood and you just use the sail. So you wouldn't necessarily have a specially cut canvas for it. You'd often use the sail of a ship just to even create that frame. You might or may not get a door particularly with that design, but at least it would keep some of the weather off as well. Again, a tent of this quality or caliber isn't going to be owned by a peasant or a thrall or a slave. It would be a middle-class merchant or someone doing a little bit better. And it could house, 2 or 3 people relatively uncomfortably with their gear.
And can you tell me about your shield? About the shields?
So the shields themselves, Viking round shields are pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Common in the era versus the more kite triangular shields of later eras or anything like that. The center boss itself is where you protect your hand. You have a standard handle on the back. Normally it would be planks put together and your handle will go against the planks. This would protect your hand from the front. They are covered in a canvas or a cloth wrap just to help protect the wood, but sometimes you'd have to just paint your wood straight on. That's more of a modern luxury for our safeties. Trimmed in leather because you don't want the edges falling apart and flying into people's faces. And then we modernly, in Finland, we use a plywood because it's structure, so usually 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch just for safety and design. And then the paint is individuals' designs. I believe this is a Raven's Root shield, though, for pattern. The white and blue with the 2 black ravens on it.
The black ravens are not
Not green. Okay.
The black ravens is officer.
Officer.
All right.
Who are the ravens?
The Ravens are the Vinland Viking group based out of Edmonton, Alberta. Their sister groups would be the Heimdall Spears out of Red Deer and Kova, or Company of Viking Archers out of Calgary, to which I'm a member. We also have a division down in Colorado.
Rephrase the question. What ravens are depicted on the shield?
I would have to, if I took a guess at it, it would be Hunan and Munin, but I don't know 100% for sure, so I defer to this gentleman who happens to have his own ravens.
The ravens are Hunan and Munin.
Odin's ravens.
So what can you tell me about this display?
So this display would be a very advanced warrior's kit, a very wealthy warrior, a very skilled warrior, either working for the king himself or being able to afford things. It does represent two different helmets of the Viking age. The ocular is a very early in our Viking age, one of the designs that they were starting to get away from even up into the late 9th and 10th century, as the weapons often slid in towards, and they swapped them out for a more nasal design. They are 4 plates together, which is a fairly traditional design going back to I believe the Roman helms had more of that kind of a split, so it was an evolution up from that. The chainmail itself, a chainmail is much like having the Ferrari, or owning a Ferrari or a mansion. It was not cheap to make. The average suit of chainmail was about 25 to 35 pounds, and you'd only find it very rarely on the best of warriors, nobles, or people maybe directly in service to a king or someone like that.
Would you have chainmail made, or would someone else have it made for you?
You'd probably have both. If you had enough money and influence, you could probably get a suit made, but I've heard a lot of gifting occurring, but for the actual answer to that, I would request deference.
Chainmail would basically always be gifted to you. It'd be gifted to you by your Jarl because you would be his prime bodyguard. You would never have it made for yourself.
Would inheritance ever occur, where you get it from a father to a son?
For chainmail, not as likely. Swords, yes. Chainmail is not inherited.
You had to prove yourself to the Jarl to win the gift of chainmail.
Good to know.
It's chainmail's a burial tradition. It's buried with you so you can use it in Valhalla.
Oh, wonderful.
That's why we have so much of it. And the sword?
The sword itself is... Swords were extremely rare in the Viking era. They're not something that you'd have like every other guy with. So you might have like one sword to every 50, 100 people. Iron and like good iron is extremely rare, that steel grade iron. So the amount of time, energy, and raw resources going into a sword equates to a lot of money. So one sword, you probably could have got 4 or 5 axes or a handful of spear tips and armed twice as many men. So much like chainmail, there is a status with a sword that you can both afford it, wield it. You're probably a very dangerous individual as well, probably in the service of protection or a very aggressive leader who's earned the right to have one.
Perfect. Let's go over to the huntsman tent over here, if that's okay.
Is my turn?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Right behind you. We're going over to the huntsman tent, if that's okay.
You're leading the tours.
We're testing him on.
Sorry, it was intentional. All right. So,
All right.
can you tell me a little bit about what's going on over here?
All right. So the huntsman's tent. I do know that this is my chief for, as I mentioned before, Kova, Company of Viking Archers out of Calgary. And he does the huntsman's or the trapper's tent here. I do know that he's currently working on a fish trap by weaving in various branches to his design, as well as he's made himself a woven backpack very period. But beyond that, I will defer to him for a bit more. Could you tell us a little bit more about your site here and what you're doing?
Well, like I say, right now I'm working on finishing up my fish trap. Ideally what's going to happen is I'll finish the weave all the way up to the top, do the small basket as well. So the idea is that then you can plug the end, wrap it closed, throw a little bit of bait in there, and then when the fish come in, they'll swim in through here, but they won't come back because it's sharp. So that sits in there like that, just gets roped in, sink the whole thing in a pond or in a lake or in a river. Fish go in, they don't come back, so I just come back in a few hours, pick the whole thing up, supper's ready. Just needs to be cooked. Sushi.
Awesome. And what's under the grass here?
So under the grass, we have, for this particular piece, and this is a more of a modern twist on what gets done. Under the grass, we have a pan. So for the purposes of camp reenactment and safety, we'd fill that particular pan with water. You can see it's just up on stones. And the water and all that allows him to hide it under this additional piece of sod. That way, if for part of his display, he could light a small fire here without damaging the grounds of the location that we've been invited to. And it allows for a little bit more controlled fire safety without having a fully raised like cooking station or something like that.
Awesome. And this tent?
This particular tent, once again, I'm going to... Keith, would you be able to tell us a little bit about your tent here?
For sure. This is just a simple scout tent or a hunting tent. It's just a rectangle of fabric with some ropes on the ends, so that you can arrange it in a few different ways. This one just has a simple center pole, peg down the outsides, you stand it up. Sleeps one or two people reasonably comfortably. Keeps you kind of warm and dry. That's all. Very simple. Very simple design. This one's made from recycled, a salvaged Viking tent that the wind caught.
So this would be more of a less of a status person.
Oh, absolutely. So the character that I'm portraying, and I realize I'm sorry this is outside your question. The character that I'm portraying is a simple freedman, hunter, fisher, small plot of land, couple animals, nothing special. Again, no fancy high status chain armor, helmets, or any of that kind of stuff. When the Jarl calls, I'll show up. I'll show up with my hunting spear, my bow, and my bucket of hunting arrows, and hopefully come back in one piece with the same number of holes that I started with.
So I have to ask about the arrows then, because you're the company of Viking archers. So, do you know anything about the arrows?
I do know that that the members of my group have made all of their own arrows by hand. In that basket, I'm not sure if they're sharps or blunts or a variety of both. But as for the hunting tips themselves, I'd have to defer to my chief here for specifics. This one would be a kind of a more standard broadhead. I know enough about arrows, I think, for that one. So this would be a more standard hunting arrow. It's got enough of a barb to be able to stick and take something down.
Cool, can I see?
No. Unfortunately, no, because this is a sharpened item. We won't allow members of the public to handle them, so I do apologize for that. This will be display only, just for the most purposes of safety. You can cut yourself on this. It is a sharp edge. So that is, they're in a basket, they're off to the side. We wouldn't leave this unattended. So if Mike wanted to go on a break, you'd have somebody come over, watch the station to make sure that an errant member of the public can't just get in and harm themselves.
Perfect. One more arrow?
Yeah, we can do a fancy. Oh, yes, okay. Oh, I know a few more arrows than I thought. So this is a bit more of an advanced arrow. This would be a fire arrow, one that you could actually put a little bit of, say, oiled cloth or tarred cloth into, and it would catch in this particular weave. It's still got a sharp point. And when, again, members of the public wouldn't be allowed near this one, it does have a sharp, skin-piercing tip. Looks like all the ones in here are sharp, so this would just be a hands-off bucket. But when you go and you decide that you want that village smoking, pre-cook your valuables that you're about to raid, take a few people out. Whether this strikes a person or a thatched roof, the side of a wooden house, a structure, it's going to just pass the fire from point A to point B. So this would be used more in a raid or a combat or a siege situation. I'm going to pretty safely say this wouldn't be really a standard hunting arrow. You cook the animal after you kill it with one of the other tips, not while it's running away from you.
Perfect.
So it's a bit more of an advanced, more complex design as well than a standard one, and uses a lot more iron as well. So
Awesome.
they are purpose-made.
Awesome. I want you to lead me over here.
All right. Over here, one of my favorite displays is the kitchen.
Cool. Can I go in there?
No, we do have these barriers up because we do have a live fire. It is.
Is the fire real?
The fire is real. Right now the fire is out, but we still have to keep this barrier up because there is the potential for it. This is a safety barrier because members of the public do like to ask if the fire is real and reach for it while they do that. One of our safety practices is any tent, such as a kitchen tent that's going to have a fire in it. We do have to put these posts up to keep people back and out of harm's way. Also, a kitchen tent always has to be open, so we wouldn't be able to set this display up in, say, one of the Gatelds or the A-frames, even though the Gatelds do have that large opening. It has to be open on the three sides because the Gateld's enclosed on three sides as a design. Having a fire in that particular location would be banned. Just for it's a higher risk of fire, more can catch on fire, and as per our safety regulations. And even then, our fire is usually near the edge of the tarp. It wouldn't be deep in there. Maybe just underneath to keep the rain off, but always near an outer portion of the canvas itself.
So what about your kitchen table here? Or your fire table, or what do you call this? Your cook station?
Our cook station. I'm just going to duck under here. All right, so this particular unit is called a ship's stove or a ship's fire. This design has been historically proven in multiple dig sites, but it is fully modular. So you can find these on land, but they're also something that larger sailing vessels. Hey guys, one sec. Oh, Violet, I need you to go put the clay and stick back there. You're not supposed to take that away from the clay station. Don't run with sticks, please. And back. Okay, thank you. All right, so the ship's stove is completely modular and collapsible. So all of these come apart right down to the main tray, something that you can store on a larger vessel. So when you're crossing the ocean, you are able to actually have a hot meal. Some of the nice designs about it, ours has notches in the side to allow us to hang, in this particular case, wood with a rotisserie in the center, but you could also put in multiple rods allowing for drying or smoking fish while you're actively have cooking pots and things going. The main aspect of this particular design and why it was safe on boats, because lighting fire on wooden boat equals sink, is this box right here. You'll see that this box is full of rocks, and one of the main aspects for that is the box itself. We do have a steel plate in the bottom, or an iron plate, which would be extremely rare. Maybe only a very wealthy individual that could waste the money on bog iron, but more often than not, it's a very thick piece of wood. And as your fire is burning on top of the rocks, because this whole structure is wood, you'd be constantly dousing the edges with a ladle and water. If you're on the ship, plenty of water around. If you're on land, you'd have a bucket or a water source nearby, and you're drenching the sides. But you'd also drench the water in on the edges here, along the outside of the rock, again, not affecting your fire. And the water would be able to saturate the entire board underneath, and that way it doesn't burn. It also helps give a controlled heat going upwards. Underneath of this would actually remain cooler than sometimes where the sun is hitting around it. As well as the rocks themselves are also going to control and take the heat in, becoming a heat source themselves. So no matter where you go and where you cook, you're always cooking over the same kind of heat source, the same controlled environment.
Is that real food on the table?
This is leftovers from our lunch. It was a lovely rotisserie chicken that got to spend a few hours up and out.
Can I try it?
Unfortunately, no. It would be a members only. When we do cook our food to feed our members at these events, the only ones allowed to eat the food, whether it be berries brought from a store or a safe location, for safety and insurance purposes, food, and that is only for members, not the public. Yeah. Hey, buddy. Okay. How about you go find your sister?
I thought you said metal was rare. How's there so much metal here?
Well, this particular station happens to be from my lady and her husband, who happen to be extremely well off. One is a bodyguard to the king, and then my lady herself is also very well off. So she's been able to afford quite a bit. These individual pots, in today's standards, would be the same as getting a fairly loaded, well-appointed car. Probably 60 to 80K equivalent. So this is good steel pots. And somebody with vast wealth would be able to use this grade of iron, which you'd find in a spear or a shield or a helmet or chainmail, on something like this. Also making these pots multi-generational. You'd probably hand these down anywhere from 4, 6, 7, 8 generations, and you just repair the bottoms. So for this one, for example, it is riveted together, and you can see a bottom plate. So that bottom plate might be replaced 3 or 4 times over its lifetime by a professional craftsman that would make these, and thus keep the life going. So they'd see quite a long use before they'd go sour. Now, people did always want to cook in pots, be it low level to high level. Your most common pots would have been tin, copper, more common cheaper metals for being able to cook in, or more of a, like maybe a bog iron for somebody that wants to do a little better. For a larger castle.
You good?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So, can you tell me your name?
My name is Issulfr Farisa.
And where are you from?
I am from Iceland, although my parents do hail from Norway, and another was a slave brought over in the first colonization years later after my father, with Gunder from the Irish island.
Awesome. And can you tell me a little bit about what you're wearing?
What I'm wearing is all linen, from the pants, my shirt, and my hood. This is a Norwegian, fairly common Norwegian outfit. The hood itself could be made of linen or wool. Same with the shirt. I have a woven belt, which would be a lot more common than leather belts or things like that. And it is
What kind
a
of
nice.
weave is that?
It's a tablet weave. The exact pattern I don't know offhand. I'd actually have to ask the person that does it. But my weaving skills are not up to par there. The pants themselves are linen. They could also be wool. They are a tight pant. They're not a big baggy pant like my lord. Material is also worth a lot of money, so given my status as a freeman, formerly a thrall, I don't have the money to show off vast wealth with vast quantities of things. The leg wraps are wool, and these shoes are handmade turn shoes made out of leather.
What type of wool? What's the pattern?
The pattern is a herringbone, I believe. Yeah.
Okay. And how do you get that color of cloth for Viking Age?
For this, it's one of my favorite colors of the Viking Age. It comes from the madder plant. So you do get an orange from the madder plant. If you want to go red, you would add something like rust to it to get a more rich red color. And the madder plant also provides us with the blue dye of the day via its roots, known as woad. Green would come from a plant, or wane. Unfortunately, I don't know yellow off the top of my head right now. I'd have to make an inquiry on that.
Okay, awesome. Good general questions?